I'm Chef Susan Odell. Welcome to the Foodell Kitchen. Peppers, you're going to use them a lot when you cook. We're going to eat them raw, we're going to saute them, roast them, you maybe use a dried variety. So let's have a look at some common peppers that you're going to use a lot in the kitchen, and also some dried varieties. We'll talk about the heat index of beautiful mild red pepper to a hot habanero, and also how to cut them and protect yourself while you're working with peppers. Some of the most common peppers, and definitely the most mild, are the bell peppers, also called capsicum in some country. They're loaded with calcium and other nutrients, and they add beautiful color to just about any dish. These are really delightful raw or sauteed or certainly roasted, which brings out their real sweetness. Now the red pepper actually starts out as a green pepper, and as it ripens on the vine, it becomes red and also becomes sweeter. So the darker the red, the sweeter the pepper is. Typically a summer crop, you can usually find bell peppers year-round. This is called a poblano pepper. You'll also sometimes see it listed as a pasilla pepper, but poblano is really the right term for it. It's long and thin and has a nice little stem on it. Always look for stems when you're looking for peppers if you can find them. Just helps indicate freshness. These are used in the classic Mexican dish chile rellenos. They've got just a little bit of heat compared to a bell pepper, but they're not nearly as hot as, say, a jalapeno. Really delightful, either raw or lightly sauteed in a dish. As we get to the smaller peppers, they become chili peppers. They're hotter. Typically, the smaller the pepper, the hotter they are. This is a jalapeno. This is a serrano pepper. And finally, I have a habanero here. These get so hot and spicy that the more you use them, say you're making a nice chili sauce or something that's got a lot of heat to it, wear gloves when you cut them because it protects your fingers. There's something called the Scoville heat index for peppers that we'll touch on just briefly, and all that does is give a unit of heat to each individual pepper. So it starts at 0 and goes all the way up well into the millions, about 16 million for some of the small Asian chilies. But for example, our bell peppers, these are at 0 on the Scoville heat index. Habaneros are at 100,000 units of heat. These are all somewhere in between. We've got the poblano chili is about 1,000 on the index, the jalapeno is at about 2,500, and the serrano is at about 10,000. So as you can see, the smaller the pepper, the higher the heat index. If you look at some of the dried chilies and maybe our little handy Tabasco sauce, this is sort of equivalent to a jalapeno as far as heat goes, whereas your cayenne pepper and your dried chili flakes are much closer to the serrano pepper. So these get hotter, so you want to use less if you don't like it hot, or more if you love it spicy. When bell peppers are called for in a recipe, you'll typically want to remove the stem and the seeds. Just use a nice sharp knife and go all the way around the outside of the pepper and then pull it open. I then take my knife and cut inside and get rid of that nice little seed pod on both sides, just cutting around it and removing it and discarding. If you want to get rid of some seeds, give it a good tap on the counter, and usually the seeds will splay out all over the place. The white membrane that you'll find inside bell peppers is a little bit bitter, so you typically want to cut that off and discard that as well. And then when you're left with just the nice sweet flesh, you can do a number of things depending on what the recipe calls for. You can just slice it thinly, or you can make nice little thicker cuts for maybe a stir fry. However you slice it, it's going to taste great. And these are nice and sweet, so you don't have to worry about the heat. For the smaller peppers and for the hotter peppers, you want a smaller knife. Use the right tool for the job. And again, you're probably going to want to remove the stem and the seeds. The seeds and the membrane, this white membrane, are where most of the heat lies. So I'm going to use a small paring knife, and I'm just going to cut around that white membrane. And I'm going to take out most of the seeds with it. You can see all those nice little spicy hot seeds are left right there. Now that I've got my flesh cut, I can probably go back to my big knife and cut it nice and small in strips. If it's a very hot pepper, I like to cut it very small so that nobody gets one big bite of heat all in one go. If you're working a lot with these small hot peppers, be sure to wear a glove on your non-knife hand. Otherwise, you'll get a burn on your fingertips, which is really similar to if you had touched a hot pan straight out of the oven. When peppers are called for in your recipe, now you know how to handle them, and you might know which one to pick. If it calls for a red pepper but you happen to see some beautiful yellow and oranges, substitute, experiment. They all taste great. And just remember, the smaller the pepper, typically the hotter it's going to be, so adjust according to your own palate. Bon appetit!